Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Cybersecurity Beyond Pentesting by Hackahaba podcast. In this episode, we had Abhishek Das joining us as a guest speaker. Abhishek Das is currently working as a director, technology, and risk consulting at a leading consulting firm. And throughout the episode, we had discussions around different topics that started with his journey, his understanding about our tagline, Cybersecurity Beyond Pentesting, to fundamentals that a company should be as in corporation you should be keeping in eye to protect your organizations in modern times. We even talked about how things have been evolved right from 2008, 9, 10 to currently being in 2025, and how different rules have been evolving right from IT head to now different organizations having CIO role, CISO roles, data protection officer roles, chief risk officer roles, and a trending and currently very uh, discussing role is chief AI officer roles that are coming up. He also focused upon how third party risk or insider threats are the main kind of weakest links, how humans are the weakest link in the organizations, and why data is the new gold. We also touched upon policies, procedures, importance of sticking it to the basics, being an senior leadership person, how changing or implementing a dedicated cyber awareness programs where you design cybersecurity calendar for the companies, make cybersecurity learnings easy and interesting, make it based on the themes, different themes that are available in the domain, and even have an approach cybersecurity training or learnings just not for the tick mark to get into the organization or something, but to have it based on the teams, like different for finance team, different for HR team, different for you know kind of other teams that are available into the organizations. We also discussed about how you know different markets react to different cybersecurity stuff, be it Asian markets where startup culture are booming and people are adopting to new technologies, AI particularly. We talked about how GDPR, how DPDT Act, or how HIPAA, ISO, all particular kind of rules and regulations are making an impact, trying securing stuff. We also even touched upon how as a beginner it is important to clear your fundamentals, get into some of the technicalities, try your hands dirty, and then get into the risk management side of cybersecurity. Lastly, we touched upon a very important topic dear to my heart. It's called mental health in cybersecurity, and how as a leader it is very important to focus on your particular mental health, balancing your personal and professional lives. Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Cybersecurity Beyond Pentesting by Hackahaba podcast. I'm Yash Gorasia, your captain and host for today's episode. With me, joining, is our guest and speaker, Mr. Abhishek Das. He is currently working as a director, technology, and digital risk consulting at a leading consulting firm. With over a decade experience working along diverse consulting roles, portfolios, and region, we are lucky to have you here on our show, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today for episode 5 of Cybersecurity Beyond Pen Testing.
Yash, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, as the title suggests, Cybersecurity Beyond Pen Testing, what is your understanding about cybersecurity beyond pen testing?
Well, very interesting question because Essentially, I think when we started off our cybersecurity journey as young professionals like you, we always thought cybersecurity was all about pen testing and vulnerability assessments. And the world has obviously moved since then. And pen testing, while it is still one of the most important areas of cybersecurity, I still believe that there's been leaps and bounds in terms of how technology itself has changed the whole meaning of pen testing. Now, you would rarely have just pen testing as one of those barriers or one of those check markers when it comes to your cybersecurity posture or your cybersecurity incident mitigation technologies in your company. So pen testing essentially has just changed its shape and form. AI has kind of taken over a lot of what pen testers would essentially do. A lot of tools and technologies have started embedding pen testing as an integral part or a module as a base to what their platforms provide. And I believe that the importance of pen testing can never go away, but the flavors and the look of it have definitely changed and it will keep evolving as time moves on.
So, it has definitely evolved around the time, and people are now adapting to it, different organizations at different levels. So everyone has some point where they started into cybersecurity and has a story and journey to share. So I'm quite excited about hearing your story, or the mission or the reason behind starting into cybersecurity, how you started, and then now working with one of the biggest consulting firms for over a decade now. So what is your journey into cybersecurity?
Well, I think when we started our journey into our professional careers, or rather, my first time using a computer was when we still had floppy disks, and we would go and copy a program onto the floppy disk, and then find after a couple of times of usage that the floppy disk was corrupt, or the floppy disk did not work anymore. And then people would say, there's a virus in the floppy disk, and that would make us stand up and notice as school children what is a virus, because we always thought virus was something that was in our body after a cold ice cream or a bad weather. But that's when we heard for the term of virus in computers and in floppy disks, and then that made us intrigued in terms of what does a virus do. Essentially, that was the journey that started off from then, from knowing what a virus would mean in a floppy disk to the time I started my career into understanding the, like I said, the basics of uh, IT risk. We didn't really have a term called cybersecurity back then. We would call these as IT risks, IT vulnerabilities. We would call them as areas in terms of just the technology going bad, and then that's where I think it started taking shape and form. For me personally, my cybersecurity journey started off when I started working with my, or rather, even before that, when I was doing my master's, I had cyber laws and ethics. I had cyber program management. In my graduation, I did courses around writing codes. I was really bad at it, and that's the reason I didn't pursue it anymore. But then I've done everything from trying to write codes on C, C Sharp, C++, Java, .NET, Awk, Shell, Perl, things which don't even make sense today, right? Especially with Copilot coming in and stuff like that. I wish I was born into this times when I would have been a master at coding, but to be honest, I was the worst. And then after that, when I started working on the fundamentals of being in a corporate job. My first stint with cybersecurity was when I did in my first job a lot of cyber fraud detection. I used to work for an insurance company where I did a lot of back office, claim assessment to see if the claims were genuine, to see if the customers were genuine, if they have been blacklisted by certain banks, etc. And that was very intriguing, and that was very exciting because we got to know that there were customers who would pose as different customers. There would be people who would file for fake claims. There would be certain photographs that were actually photoshopped even back then to file for a claim of an accident, which was not the case. And we used a lot of techniques. There were a lot of tools and stuff, and a lot of. I think we also relied a lot on our the human intelligence to understand what was fake and what was real. Had it been today, again, I would have had an AI machine interpreting it. But then again, there could have been an AI absolutely doing a great job in creating the picture itself, right? So I think that's how technology has changed. as I moved along, I think the sense of cybersecurity in the industry changed. We started speaking about incidents, about events, about how companies are putting in controls to ensure those don't happen. On the other side of the business, companies started evolving in terms of being creating those platforms. Earlier, when it was cybersecurity, we only knew of antivirus companies, right? And then essentially that changed. Now you don't have any antivirus company. If you say you're an antivirus company, you're essentially dead on day one, right? What you're essentially are talking about now are threat detection, platform intelligence. You're talking about XDRs, MXDRs. You're talking about, CTI platforms, and that's how the evolved. The cybersecurity space has evolved, and as professionals, that's how we've evolved. And now, the company that I work for, we are helping clients in terms of understanding their cyber risk posture, their cyber strategies, how do they mitigate them, what should be the right controls. And I think interestingly, another point, Yash, that's really changed is, when we started off, there used to be a head of IT, right? The head of IT was someone we thought used to manage our their desktop and the mouse balls and the printers not working, all of that. And then the head of IT became somebody who started looking at applications, and he also started looking at infrastructure. That being said, that designation's changed to somebody called as the CIO. And then the CIO would also look at security as a function. And then security became such a big function that essentially that role got broken into a CISO, which is the Chief Information Security Officer. And then you would have a CIO, and then you'd have a Chief Information Security Officer. Now, the world of digital evolved, and then you had a CDO, which was a Chief Digital Officer. So essentially, responsibilities got divided because there was more focus required on the particular business lines. And now you've got a CIO, you've got a CDO, you've got a Chief of Information Security, you've got a Chief of Risk, and then you've got a Chief of Emerging Technologies. Now, a lot of companies that I work for have, started talking about having somebody who can look at the AI risk of it. So that's how the evolution has been, and that's how my journey has been.
So I kind of went back to times where you talked about being in 2009 10, where financial frauds were a thing, not just this cyber or bad actors started coming in after evolutions of technology. Human intelligence was even a part, and then the roles of senior officials have changed from just IT head or IT management person to now organizations having specific data protection officer or chief risk officer, or even recent times have been I have been seeing a lot of posts around chief uh, AI officer, CAIO. So yeah, that as the technology is evolving and changing, we would see uh, changes around in it. So I'm wondering how different platforms and mediums are being used by attackers to breach into networks from an organizational perspective, and how companies are securing or are taking care of their cybersecurity pushes when it comes to bad actors or malicious cyber actors trying to get into systems.
But it's a very interesting point, right? Because if you look at how businesses have evolved, there is not a single business out there today who is just doing business by themselves, right? They've got different dealers, different distributors, different suppliers, different business partners who are working with them. And when I say working with them, essentially they are also connected to their platforms in some shape or form. So if I am a company and I'm trying to just secure my posture, or if I'm just trying to secure my landscape, I would say that's the biggest mistake I could make, because I also need to ensure that my interfaces, that my integrations with my third parties are also as secure, or if not more, because that's where the bad actors can really, play their role. And if you look at the recent threats that's happened, right, they've been very, very exciting times, especially if I am a ethical hacker trying to mitigate another bad actor's actions, because there is such a lot of movement that's happening, and very, very I would say unique in the shape. I was working with a auto company very recently, and there was a cyber attack that happened to one of the users. And the cyber attack happened because the the hacker actually penetrated through the the music system or the audio systems on the cars, um, they planted a vulnerability into the audio system. And every time that the user would connect his Android device or the Apple Play into the car's navigation or the GPS system, the hacker would gain access into the phones of the user and then would have complete control of not only their phones and then eventually their other devices because there was one connected ecosystem, right? So that was my example. The other one was again very unique. So I was working with a retail company in the UK, and they had an incident where all the tills or the POS systems where when a customer goes and scans their QR code or goes and scans their barcodes on their products, and then eventually once the bill is generated, they put in their or they touch or they swipe their cards. That portal itself on which the system was integrated for the payment was actually was designed with a vulnerability in it, and then it was exploited in such a way that your credit card details would be siphoned off in a matter of seconds, and that would then go and reside into a absolutely encrypted database that actually resided within the environment of the retail chain, and the retail chain wasn't aware of it, right? So that was another sort of an event that happened. I'll give you another example of a pharmaceutical company where a pharma is a very very data intensive sort of a sector. And in that sector, it is not only the formulation or how the medicine or the product is made that is at risk, but it's also the patient's data that is at risk as well, because there's so much of patient data that is hosted at a pharmaceutical company. It knows your DNA sequence, it knows your genes, it knows your private sensitive information as per the GDPR rules. And essentially, it can actually know everything that you do online on as your digital persona and offline because they have data about you as an individual. Now, there was this company that actually used data analytics to create a visual platform. Now, every time that a medicine was manufactured, you would believe that a cyber threat could actually happen at either the POS level or at the website levels. But what the hackers essentially did was they went and attacked the R&D system where the medicine, the formulations were being designed as a digital twin, right? And I'm touching upon another area of digital twin here because that's again a very emerging sort of business when it comes to the risk side of the world. So the digital twin was actually designed in such a way where the vulnerability was embedded into that. And when the productionization of that happened, we realized that every time that there was an API molecule or a patient data that was going into the database, a copy of that was auto created onto the site of the hacker. And by the end of a week, just about a week's time, till the time it was active and before it was identified, in a week's time, it actually collected almost 2.3 billion lines of data of customers, of users, of patients, of API providers, of suppliers. And that is essentially your entire organization's data. And that's what we live for. So if I am that company, I'd be extremely scared, at the same time, extremely concerned about what data is out there. And if any of my sensitive information about how I run my business is out there, a competition can just overtake me in a matter of months if that data is out public.
Yeah, it reminds me of a phrase, data is new gold, and we are putting our heart and soul in order to protect them. So I didn't knew about this concepts of digital twin, but what you said about third party risk and unstandard threats that are emerging. I remember a case study wherein I was studying about an big US corporation. Again, it was a retail sector company, and they went through a data breach few years back. I'm talking about somewhere around 2013 15, and the reason it went through the data breach was, even they were aware about the risks that were there in the systems. They kind of ignored it once and twice, and then it became uh, attacker exploited that particular you know vulnerability that was available in the third party software, or what we call POS, and tills that are available at retail stores. So kind uh, even I was studying about this today only. So it kind of refreshed me of, okay, these are the possible things that can be done today also, not just in 13, 15. So what are the fundamental?
You made a very interesting point, Yash, about digital twin. So I'll take a minute to explain that, right, to the audience as well. So, um, digital twin is nothing but actually programming or pre-designing a particular flow of how a thing would be when it is actually in the real life, right? For example, if I'm producing or I'm manufacturing a car, right? I don't have to actually manufacture the entire supply. I don't have to create the entire supply chain and then realize that there was a fault that was there because of a part where say the door was not coming properly, and that is the reason the doors were loose. What I do through a digital twin is I create a augmented reality of it online on the computer as a platform. And then I see whether every part of that supply chain is working fine. So that when I actually make it, into a productionized production chain, then I have no sort of surprises or questions about how it will come in because I've already envisaged the entire flow. And this is on the manufacturing side. But then if you look at it from an IT standpoint, you essentially are creating a supply chain, say, for example, or you're creating a product already online using the metaverse, you're using AI, you're using, different platforms like CAD, CAMs, etc. And then essentially you're seeing how that takes life. And then it's very easy to then productionize it. And the chances of that failure drastically drops because you've already seen the success of it in a virtual world. So that's what digital twin means.
So it typically, if I get uh, rid of digital twins, essentially get an insight about what supply chain would look like in that organization, and then even how product would look like. So w- you have been in the digital risk domain for I think a decade now. So and things have changed drastically over the last few years. So for an organization in the current times, what are your takeaways, that what are the things fundamentally they should be doing in order to protect them?
So here I have a very different view. I think when it comes to digital risk, again, I believe it is a fancy name for just being very, very clear on our IT security controls, on our IT governance, on our regulatory and non regulatory compliances, and our policies and processes, right? These are the four areas that I would say are the most important pillars. And they're the most traditional ones as well, right? So I might have the best tools, platforms, solution in the world. But if I don't have the right policies, I don't have the right controls, I don't have the right framework, I am not adhering to the right regulatory controls, uh, then even the best platforms cannot help my organization when it comes to a breach or a security incident or an event, right? So I believe sometimes it's best to go back to basics, especially when it comes to digital risk, because digital risk, in my opinion, is a combination of your infrastructure, your applications, your interfaces, your people, and your innovations that have come into these platforms, right? So if these are the areas that comprise your digital landscape, in that case, I believe it's best to go back to basics, look at how each of these have their governance structures, whether the people who are managing these platforms know what to do, what not to do, whether they know what are those policies that need to be adhered to, what are those governing controls that need to be followed. And at the end of the day, I also believe that there are certain functions that are responsible to do this. So that could be your CIO's function, it could be the chief digital officer, it could be the chief risk officer, the head of internal audit. So I believe these are the functions that need to ensure that your digital risk persona and your organization are well protected.
So yeah, so what I can understand from this is uh, leadership people or someone at an top of the chain needs to understand the posture, understand your security architect, and then act accordingly about checking your fundamentals, how it is, and how things are being uh, integrated certain new technologies are coming. We talked about even slightly touched upon IoT, augmented reality. So even these are the threats that these technologies could contain several threats along with this. So one thing, while I have been into cybersecurity for a while now, one thing I loved about this industry is kind of collaboration and kind of collective effort everyone are putting in to make digital environment a secure place to be in. Uh, Let it be organization, let it be individuals, or even big corporations. So what's your views on how are companies globally targeting or collaborating, integrating or collaborating to make cybersecurity more comprehensive and accessible?
Well, I think it starts from embedding the business as a key decision maker on your IT decisions as well, right? Because if you are two different teams working in isolation, so if you have a IT team which is taking its own calls in terms of the enhancements, the tools, the platforms, and then you have a business teams whose needs, necessities, issues are completely isolated. In that case, you will never have a consolidated IT security or a cybersecurity landscape, right? Because eventually, what IT teams are doing are trying to protect the business and the business needs and the business vulnerabilities. And what business is trying to do is essentially make profits for the company, those products for the customer, and then sort of be the or try to kind of mitigate the risk of a brand corrosion, right? So that's essentially what the business is doing. And that's where IT needs to kind of be the leverage they need to make when it comes to having a very holistic cybersecurity environment, right? Now, how does this work is when, if there is a decision, let me take an example of um, something like a ERP system, right? Now, a ERP system's requirement is not something that an IT team will generate. It is a business driven initiative. It is something that the business team will benefit. The manufacturing, the production, the sales, the warehouse, all these teams will benefit with it. The finance teams will benefit with it, and that's why they come to the IT teams saying, "Hey, you know what? We've decided to go with an ERP platform, and now we need the IT teams to help us in ensuring that this is rolled out." Now, does the IT team roll it out? Answer is no. You would have a third party system integrator or a consulting firm to come and do that for you. The system integrator and the consulting firm will leave the day the system is up and alive, right? But after that, to keep the lights on, to ensure that that is not penetrated or there is no cyber issues or there are cyber threats or attacks, to keep the light on is where the IT teams will then come into place. Now, if the IT team is not aware of what the ERP is meant to do, or what is this business requirement, what does this business need, who are the users, how is it used, what could be the functionalities of it. Just imagine if I am driving a car and I don't know where the gearbox is, right? I'm destined to fail and go and crash. It's exactly the same way. If the business doesn't know what is the intention, or rather say if the IT doesn't know what is the intention of the business application that has just been implemented for millions of pounds, in that case, they will obviously fail. So that's where the integration, like I mentioned, between IT and business becomes so much more important. The second is eventually the users of the system, and I always say this, that the humans are the weakest link when it comes to cybersecurity, comes in when a application is in your in your landscape, or a IT infrastructure is in landscape. You've given your employees the best of phones, the best of laptop, work from home, all of those flexibilities. But if an employee is not aware of how to use them, right, then I think it just fails. And that is where I believe the basics, again, I go back to the basics of having the right controls, the right policies, the right trainings, uh, backed up with the right tools, technologies becomes so much more important. And I believe as companies grow, as companies and employees kind of become more diverse and more global, having a consolidated IT strategy, having a consolidated risk strategy and a risk management framework is just going to help organizations mitigate the risk even better. Because you can't just have local frameworks and local IT policies, because organizations have scaled up and you have users from different parts of the world essentially working on the same project, right? So in that case, I think you have to have a holistic one.
So I was about to get to how it is important for an organizations to focus on cyber awareness trainings, and you already emphasize, okay, it is important in how people are the weakest link, and if we given the right amount of awareness or the knowledge, they could be the first line of defense also within the organization. So I have seen this for few organizations that uh, human resource HR departments are the one that are responsible to ensure that all the people of the company takes the training and goes through cyber awareness stuff. So what do you think? Should Is it the right time to start having and particularly dedicated cyber awareness teams wherein people or the one who is heading the department understand the security posture of the organization and not just have common cyber security trainings, awareness trainings?
Yeah, I think you touched upon a very interesting point about um, the HR teams being responsible to that, right? I think the HR team's responsibility ends only, or rather starts and ends when a new employee joins in, right? That is when the HR teams, as part of an induction or a training to the company, um, would give a certain list of guidelines or a read through document. My point about training here is someone who's actually aware of what needs to be done and not just a tick mark activity where someone is just sitting on a training module over lunch, chatting away with their colleagues, having coffee, clicking on buttons, and 30 minutes they have a certificate which says they are cybersecurity ready. No, it doesn't work anymore, right? What companies have started doing is they've started working with, say, for example, with consultants like us on designing a cybersecurity calendar, right? So what we are helping clients do is we've started taking themes, right? So for for the calendar for the year, for example, if there are 12 different themes that we take for one for each month, right? So one could be a privacy month, one could be about uh, about IT collaboration month. One could be about simple things like, how do you keep your physical, security safe? One is about how you keep your access safe. One could be about how are you looking at sharing information outside and inside the organization, right? So you're going to have different themes in terms of what works best for you. And then those specific trainings are then embedded organization wide. Now, when I say organization wide, a training module that works for somebody in the sales team could be very, very different to somebody sitting in the finance team. It could be very, very different to the leadership, and it could be very, very different to the intern who's just joined it, right? So you can't just have a common training across that, right? So what you need to do is you need to have one is a themed out approach. For every month you have a specific theme. Second is you need to have user groups identified where you know that the training module, while about 60% of it could be content driven and generic, about 40% of it has to be customized to the business function that you represent. And you should also have a customization in terms of the role that you perform and the seniority or the level at which you're working, because essentially that's where the vulnerabilities also change. There have been cases where I've known that a specific, and I'll give you an example of a client that I've actually worked on. Um, now, the CEO had a I in his name, okay, uh, but then there was a phishing attempt where somebody with a L in the name had sent an email to an intern who had just joined in, asking them for access to their platform, which was sensitive in nature. Now, the intern would never say no to an email that has come from the CEO, right? And he did not bother to see if that I was a L or the L was an I because it looked the same. The moment he got an email from the CEO asking for this data, he was very, very nervous, excited, enthusiastic by the fact that he had to share this data, and he did it immediately. And this was fortunately done internally just to check whether employees know how to check for email addresses that they're responding to, right? What if this was done with a malicious intent and the data had actually gone out, right? So I think training needs to be, like I mentioned, customized according to the user group, seniority, designation, function. and the theme needs to be exciting, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be doing a training which is boring and you're just doing it as an activity for just getting yourself compliant to the organization's need.
Yeah, regarding that example, I also remember a few times wherein, while I was working remotely with a consultancy firm, we had this constant email coming in from some spammer about, CEO busy in a meeting and wanting to get some help with XYZ task. And then we used to share it in our, channels, so random channels about, okay, I received this email. If you are also receiving, ask them, okay, I'm also busy. Then I can't help you with that particular time now. So it kind of used to look like fun, but when someone like an intern trying to, just mark his foot into the organization receives such emails, it becomes uh, like what you said about, enthusiastic, about nervous, because how being an intern I would be receiving an email from a CEO. Does not have this amount of time to just, start sending emails to interns. Rather, they would ask someone down the chain to do that. So, yeah, it's a kind of bit a tricky one about how one should be identifying those emails. And yeah, now you have worked in different zones, be it from, different cybersecurity markets. So what are the few differentiators you see, or like three differentiators and three common points you saw across different cybersecurity markets, be it USA, UK, Europe, Middle East, or Asia?
Well, I think when you look at the cybersecurity sort of changes that happen, right, or cybersecurity trends, like you mentioned, that are maybe common or different in different geographies, what drives the requirement or what drives the change is basically your consumers, um, and the level of maturity they are at from a business standpoint. If you look at Asia generally, Asia it is in a absolutely high growth, absolutely turbocharged when it comes to digital transformation, right? So there's a lot of innovation happening. There's a lot of money being pumped out. The startup ecosystem is booming. There are small companies who are doing wonderful stuff and innovations, and there are a lot of innovations coming in that businesses have started adopting. And the risk there is more about how do you mitigate the risk coming in from companies who don't have the right sort of controls, who have just been mushrooming it out when it comes to, either new features and new functionalities, because they all want to be digital first. They want to start speaking about AI. They want to say that we are an AI company, and they've, got all of those sort of spends in the organization. But are they doing it the right way is the question that a lot of people don't have an answer to. When it comes to Europe, and specifically, West Europe and the UK, I think one of the main concerns is not so much about the speed of innovation, but it's also about whether the thing is being done right, right? I think the focus on regulations, the focus on compliance, the focus on data integrity is extremely high compared to, say, the Asian markets. So that would be something that I think is very, very different. The second is the scale and speed of adapting to a new technology. I think it's slightly more slower in the UK and in Europe, because there is a lot of due diligence that happens to understand whether that application or that change in the platform would have a ripple effect on your IT ecosystem and your compliances. Whereas in Asia, while that is getting better, I still believe, because of the race to be the first in the industry or be more customer friendly or give the customer the choice of more, in terms of the product offering over a competition, there are places where I think corners are cut and companies are sort of looking at just getting it productionized and out there, rather than actually looking at whether those meet the requirement from a regulatory, from a safety, from an interface standpoint. So that's the second one. But the third one I also believe is the level of maturity where organizations and businesses are. So if you look at the US, um, we take two sectors. Let's take banking and let's take pharmaceuticals, right? If I take the pharmaceutical sector, and I'll give you an example of where the UK is, where India is, and where the US is. So the US has a very stringent sort of body known as the US FDA, right, which is the Food and Drug Authority. The UK has something known as the MHRA, which is the Ministry of the regulations and health. They kind of look at that, and then you've got India, which has also got its own FSSI and etc. when it comes to the food and safety, when it comes to the medical and the pharmaceutical industry, etc. Now, when it comes to the adherence to certain policies, I would say India is doing a phenomenal job when it comes to having the right controls, when it comes to quality, when it comes to productionization, when it comes to being compliant to IT standards, be it an ISO 27001, ISO 9001, being compliant to different now with the new privacy law coming in. So I think that is an industry where there is still a lot of regulation that has come in. But if you look at some of the other sectors, it's not so much. But if you look at the UK, for example, while the UK has a huge presence when it comes to the pharmaceuticals and the consumer space, I believe the controls around the quality side of the business is still very, very um, dependent on manual processes. There is still a lot of dependencies on the quality assurance, the quality controls team to kind of look at their legacy processes, legacy papers, and give those authorizations. Whereas it's completely different in the US, where because of the US FDA being so strong about regulations, you have a lot of automation, you've got a lot of innovations, you've got platforms, you've got QMS systems, you've got LIMS systems. So essentially, what I mean is for the same sector, there could be different levels of maturity in different parts of the world because of which the innovation or the IT standards around it are changing. If you take the banking sector, for example, um, the UK has been phenomenal when it comes to fraud analytics, right? So, every time you've got, and it's probably the most, it's probably a very, very savvy industry when it comes to fraud because it's very easy for you to sort of misplace your credit card and somebody can just touch it and swipe a lot of money out from there. But at the same time, the controls around it are so strong that, the authentications, the checks and controls, the digital enablement when it comes to having an integration with your fraud analytics systems and your Apple Pays, your GPays, etc., is so enhanced. Whereas when you look at say India right now, while there are absolutely great robust controls on the payment gateways, on QRs when it comes to payments, and everybody is accessible to that, but I still believe there is so much of fraud. Every second day, there's a new sort of a different channel of fraud that's come in. Somebody sending a link to click, through a wedding card. Somebody speaking about a fake QR code and asking for money through a deep fake video. So I think essentially the level of maturity is changing depending on what country you are in, what industry you're from. And I believe that's something that will always be there. I think that disparity will always remain because of the maturity. Like I said, the speed of growth, the higher the speed of growth, the more the vulnerability and risk will be because that gives you less time to essentially go back to the basics and see what your controls and your frameworks are.
Uh, I think I was about to touch upon how India is adapting to new DPDT Act and things around it, and the next question was again about how lots of startups or even mature organizations started integrating AI just to look because it looks cool. AI integrated XYZ product or a platform. So how do you think AI has impacted digital risk or cybersecurity in general?
Well, I go back to this example a lot, and I've spoken about this in a few other forums as well. Essentially, AI is not new, right? I mean, AI as a term, I believe was a 1960 kind of coined term. And my biggest example of AI, right, is is an ATM machine, right? What is an ATM machine? It has taken away about 20% jobs from banks for people who used to sit at the cash counter. When you would go as somebody who needs money, you would go and give a slip. The person would go and check whether you have that much of balance. He or she would count the cash. He or she would give it to you, would make the necessary changes, would authenticate it with a stamp, put that stamp on the paper back and give you your money and out. All of this would take about 15 to 20 minutes from the time you came into the bank to the time you got your cash, if it was an empty bank on that day. What did ATMs do? Was it just automated the whole thing where you went, you stood, the bank would authenticate whether you're the right person using your PIN, would check whether you have the right amount of balance, would then predict whether you wanted that money, whether it could give you that money or not. It also gave you a few other options of wanting to change your PIN, wanting to give you another overdraft, etc., etc. It did a little bit of sales work for you. Once the money was out, it recalculated your balance, gave you a slip, and then it was done. Isn't that the concept of AI? Essentially, while you're looking at predictive analytics as a separate thing and generative AI as a separate topic altogether, but people misuse the word AI so much because artificial intelligence is supposed to do the basics of, here in the bank's case or the ATM's case, to check whether you're the right person, whether you are the person who wants that right money, whether you have that much of balance in your account, gives you that money, reduces the amount from the account, and closes the transaction securely. That is AI at play, right? Now, if I am adding Gen AI to that, is a completely different topic where I'm using, a huge amount of data sets. I'm using predictive analytics. I'm asking intelligent questions. I'm asking, if I invest XYZ amount of money into a ABC fund, with a annual return of 14%. What is your prediction that can happen in 3 years' time? Is this the best fund? That is AI at play, right? Where AI gives you those analytics, the responses, etc., basis the data set this has. But having said that, there are a lot of companies who are doing the first case of just doing automation and packaging that as AI. Automation is not AI. Digitization is not AI. There are companies who say, you know what, we've got a AI engine that speaks back to you. That is not AI. That is essentially just our voice engineered assistants, which are speaking of a database or a rule set, right? So I think the term AI is absolutely abused at this point in time. What its possibilities are probably still not another even now. I would think about 30 to 40% of it is just known to us, but a lot more is not known in terms of what can happen. Uh, but I am also happy that organizations have started embedding AI in everything. And that I think has a lot of potential to make our applications smarter, our devices more smarter, our business processes more quicker. From a cybersecurity standpoint, I think it's phenomenal because it has the ability to predict, to detect, to correct, to assess, to rectify, to mitigate, and then at the same time to also ensure that the AI engine learns from it, and then it is not repeated again in the future, which I believe differentiates it from a human being, where even if you learn from a mistake, there are possibilities that you could repeat it with a little bit of change in terms of what's occurred. But when it comes to a machine, and especially with AI, because it picks up so many mistakes on a daily basis, learns from it, and then I believe that could be the fix to a lot of problems.
Yeah, I kind of remember about trying my hands at one of the cloud services and then building a voice agent based on that. So that typically was I giving instructions and then training that voice system based on the responses I had, and it automatically, you know, gave the results that people were wanting to hear, like booking a restaurant or you know uh, going to a place is suggesting something. So I think this is not new, but it is evolving, and chat gpt in particularly has, that you spoke about being in generative ai impacting. So text based generative ai has been disruptive, and people are utilizing it in a right way also and in wrong way. So just, a quick suggestions about what is your view on people utilizing it and how they should be using it securely.
Again, I go back to the car example, right? You've been gifted a really fancy new car by, your relative, and then you decide to drive it at 140 and go and bang it into a tree, right? And then there is somebody else who decides to, oh, it's the first time I'm getting a car, decides to use it at about 30 or 40 kilometers per hour. He's very, very careful about it, comes back home and wraps it in his, new garage and is safe and the keys are back home. I think the car was the same, the roads were the same, the change was the person driving it, right? Same thing with technology. I believe the same platform, the same applications, the same softwares depends on who's using it and for what. It is a very, very individually driven, persona driven, I would say, normally when it comes to how it is supposed to be used, especially in the world of AI and LLMs and stuff, right? Now, there are regulations which are coming up, and the EU AI Act or the NIST AI framework. Every country kind of coming up with its own laws. Every organization coming up with its do's and don'ts. So, for example, the organization I work for, it has its own protocols in terms of what AI engines can be used, what cannot be used, what sort of data can be shared, what sort of data cannot be shared. We have also built our own AI platform, which we use extensively because we deal with a lot of clients and we can't share client sensitive data on a chat GPT or a Gemini or something like that. So I think there are a lot of controls, there are a lot of sort of regulations coming in. But with regulations comes the human tendency to break a regulation, right? So if there is a regulation which says you should not put XYZ on an AI platform, there would be a majority of people, there is a section of people who would want to do that and see what can go wrong, right? So I think there will always be those gray actors. I'm not calling them black actors, but there'll always be those gray actors, those bad actors, um, who would want to exploit something that is meant not to be exploited. And like I said, again, I go back to the basics. It's an individual thing. You can have the right frameworks as an organization. Governments are really looking at AI differently. Just the other day, you would have seen the AI conference that happened in France, for example, with the Prime Minister of India, the Prime Minister of France, the President of the Vice President of the US, everywhere there. And I think I just believe that governments have started looking at AI very, very seriously because there is a lot of data at stake that can go absolutely rogue when it comes to government files as well. So they are being very, very careful and cautious about how data is being used in their own archives and in their own enterprises as well.
Yeah, regarding this, I was kind of exploring how AI is impacting the organizations, and I came across one of the NIST AI risk management framework that has been rolled out with the efforts of different organizations, and then even MITRE has rolled out some of the precautions or check marks that organizations can follow in order to ensure that uh, risk management stuff are done rightly. So we talked about digital risk or internal risk management as an domain. So let's say even it is a personal, I also wanted to know more about it. So for someone looking to build a career in uh, digital risk management or digital risk consulting or strategic consulting, so what are your suggestions and how one as in beginner, because every beginner wants to be a pen tester or a security analyst in majority of the areas we see. So for them to see starting in risk management or starting in risk consulting, what is your suggestions how they should be doing it?
Well, I think there's no easy fix to it in terms of you got to get your hands dirty, you got to roll up your sleeves and ensure that you're doing those assessments. You're starting from the basics, right? Because unless you don't know what goes wrong at the foundation levels, for you to be a successful cybersecurity expert or a digital risk expert going ahead, you would always scratch at the surface without knowing what beneath, right? So I personally believe unless you don't do just those ITGCs, you got to do those IT application controls, the IT general controls, the top review. You got to go and do those VAs, the PTs. You got to go and do the threat analytics. You got to go and actually look at how a data center cable wire can go wrong, even if the world is going virtual. You got to go and see how third party risk management works and what are those thousands of layers of papers when an audit happens in terms of what are those gaps, how are the fixes, etc. You need to understand that the world of cybersecurity is changing, right? So while what I mentioned is very, very important for you to have the right frameworks, but you should always, as an individual also, and as a professional, be very, very curious and very, very inquisitive when it comes to what's happening, what's new in the industry. Um, unless you don't have that fire in the belly to understand and learn constantly, right? You would have suddenly seen, and this is on the lighter note, you would have suddenly seen a lot of people who are, probably upwards of 50, 55, suddenly changing their designations on LinkedIn as AI experts, right? Now, my terminology of an expert is somebody who's been in doing that for the last 15 to 20 years. And AI just came in that sense of the term, maybe 3 years ago in the boom that it is. How did this gentleman or this lady become an AI expert in that case, right? So I think it is only about constantly trying to change and evolve yourself from a professional standpoint. But what we are professionally also stems from who we are personally, right? So unless you don't have that desire to learn, constantly evolve, constantly unlearn and learn is very, very important. Organizations will support you, but as an individual, there's so much of data out there today. There's so much of information, so many free courses. Go to Coursera, go to, you have so many other Udemy's. I'm sure your organizations will sponsor you for trainings. Uh, you know, I would have definitely gone recommended you going and doing a CISSP, you doing a CISA, you doing a GCIH, which is more on the incident handler. You're doing stuff like GSEC, more on the security essentials part of it. You want to do certifications around ISO 27001, ISO 9001. But at the end of the day, like I said, your certifications will give you that added layer on your resume, right? It will give you that added layer in your professional services consulting experience. But till the time you don't go and do it at a client place, till the time you don't do it in your daily lives of actually facing an incident, facing an attack, seeing how a resolution is made, how a patch is fixed, how vulnerability addressed, how to identify a impending cyber threat in your landscape, you will never learn. So from me, I think the basics are get your hands dirty, experience it firsthand, use your tools and technologies, but always, always be very hungry to learn and always keep looking out what's happening in the industry.
Yeah, I was attending, a event last to last week, and uh, I was having this discussion with few of the senior leadership people, and I had this question. I asked them, "You have been in industry for 10, 20 years now. So, what is more important for a cybersecurity person getting into it, or who has few years of experience? Is it passion, or is it knowledge?" So they were, without thinking for a second, they straight away said it is passion that keeps you moving forward every time. Keep learning, keep unlearn things that are not working now, and then keep moving forward. So rightly touched upon, it is very important to keep that passion alive in order to be into cybersecurity.
Absolutely. I think your passion is probably the most important attribute to you, like I mentioned, as a personality trait. With passion, I also think the fact about wanting to be humble about what you know and your limitations is also very important. Because you don't want to be a jack of all trades when it comes to cybersecurity, because that phase is really past now, where you could say I'm a cybersecurity generalist, because that's something that even your IT teams could do. If you are a cybersecurity professional, you are expected to be a specialist in one of those areas or the pillars of cybersecurity, which could be the incident, it could be threat, it could be prediction, it could be um, vulnerabilities, it could be about platforms, it could be cloud, it could be data, privacy. So essentially, you got to look at your career. While passion is great, you also need to have the clear path in terms of where you want to build your expertise and your specialization, and then pursue your career as you move around there.
So yeah, I think people would want to go ahead and see, experiment things, get your hands dirty, look around, what is right for you. And you already touched upon, I was about to ask this, a very discussed questions in the field of cybersecurity. Is certification play and important role while building your career in digital risk or cybersecurity consulting. So you already give an answer to that. Now the last question we typically ask all the guests that came in our podcast is, being a senior leader, you have a lot of things on your plate at the times, and there are teams, different teams working under you. So what is your take on importance of mental health in cybersecurity, and how people should be focusing on balancing their personal and professional lives?
Well, I think especially in cybersecurity, right? You're dealing with machines and it's never easy. Dealing with humans is tougher, but dealing with machines when there is the fear of the unknown can be extremely mind boggling. And as a cybersecurity professional, you are expected to be one step ahead of the vulnerability or the hacker who's about to hack you, right? So it can be challenging. It can be extremely daunting when it comes to uh, continuously be on the brink of, either having the right tools, are your teams doing the right things, um, how exposed is your posture when it comes to incidents, what was that last audit finding that came to me and did I fix it, what are those tools that still need to be patched up. I think there are questions which will continuously be coming to you as a leader. But having said that, it's very important to draw the balance between madness and method. If you've got the right sort of strategies in place, if you've got the right teams in place, if you've had the right sort of delegation when it comes to, like I mentioned, the experts doing the right things, I cannot be a good leader if I expect someone who doesn't have the passion, confidence, or the knowledge to do something that they are not supposed to do or are not interested in doing, right? So if I have those teams in place, if I have the right policies in place, if I have the right tools in place, I believe a lot of it can be actually managed. It cannot be completely mitigated, but it can definitely manage better. And as a leader, I believe unless you don't have the right balance of your personal and professional life, if you don't have the right mental space, um, you cannot thrive either as an individual or as a professional. So it is the most important thing to have the right wellness programs, whether it could be completely disconnecting from your activities as an organization, the right sort of socials, the right sort of keeping it light days, etc., but very, very important in keeping your sanity in check.
Yeah, I think it is very much important, even as an individual working, to keep a slightly focus on your mental health, keep it stable, because you are working in a challenging field where every day there is something new happening, and that's how we are also trying to drive this awareness around importance of mental health in cybersecurity. So before concluding, any last minute suggestions or conversations you would want to convey to the audience?
But I just believe cybersecurity, digital risk, IT security are all such you know such an evolving space, such an interesting time to be in that space. And I believe what we've seen as risks are just the tip of the iceberg. There is so much more that can go wrong. There are so many more things that we've probably not even been exposed to because technology is changing at an absolutely amazing speed. And if security and risk management frameworks do not keep up to it, I believe the unknowns could be absolutely disastrous. So, as cybersecurity and IT risk professionals, I believe, like I go back to it, while it's important to know your stuff, it's important to know your basics, very essential to know what's coming up, keeping an eye on platforms, companies, tools, professionals, colleagues, keep learning from their experiences, from their mistakes, and then ensuring that the next time you've been breached, the next time you've been reached out to, you're very well prepared to what's coming.
So that was all. Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your knowledge about different topics, different dimensions of cybersecurity, digital risk, and AI in general. In episode 5, I hope people get to learn from your experience, your story, and the amount of things that you shared in this episode, and even get inspired to get started into digital risk management, or start getting their hands dirty, and then shifting into the different domains of cybersecurity. That's all for today. See you all in the next episode of Cybersecurity Beyond Pentesting.